Come on, Clifford. Let's go, bud. Let's go. Come on. Good boy. Okay, mister. You ready? Let's go. Ryder, Riggs.
As long as cattle graze the Golden Hills in eastern Washington,
Hey, cows. Hey, cows. Good girls. Come on.
cowboys like Bill Johnson
Hey.
keep an eye on them.
Come on. Stay in a group. Let's go, guys. Come on. Stay in a group. Some days I am on a horse literally 12 hours. Other days I may saddle up. I may spend more time in my truck going over the top, looking for tracks, and I might spend 2 hours in the saddle. Hey, cow, hey!
These Black Angus belong to rancher Sam Kaiser.
We have a couple hundred up here. I told somebody I have too many when I have to feed them hay and not enough when I sell them.
Kaiser leases 30,000 acres of public grazing land in the Teanaway.
So this is the beginning of our range.
Johnson's his hired hand.
This field, and then all the way up to the Stafford Creek Bridge.
Making sure the cattle stay within those bounds and get plenty of salt and water.
I put 4 blocks in here, and as you can see, they're working pretty well. I'm guessing that the cattle now are grazing up in, then they come down to salt, then go to water, then go back up. So we try to keep the salt between the water and their range.
Cowboys have been called to this same rugged, dusty work for generations. But about 5 years ago, the job took on a new high-tech responsibility.
I have location points of wolves right here where we're standing.
Johnson's tracking the GPS signal from the wolves' collars put on by the state.
Something's been tearing into that as well.
And does what he can to keep them away from the cattle.
You know, if the wolves are around, I do try to make as much noise as possible. You know, I try to make human noises, whistle, shout, talk loudly to my dogs and my horse. Hey girls, good cows, there you go, good job.
Cowboys who use these tricks called range riders, and some consider them the best way to avoid conflicts with wolves without killing them.
Bring them, dogs, bring them.
Other ranchers out here,
It's been extremely horrible for the people on the ground here.
they don't see it the same way.
You can look at this country, you're not going to be able to babysit every cow every day. I don't care how many people you have out there.
You can do all the jumping up and down out in the brush and hollering and everything else. All they got to do is duck around the corner and out of sight and do what wolves do.
Once they go bad, you're probably not going to change their ways.
Two extremes drive the debate over the reintroduction of wolves.
There's one camp that thinks, you know, we should be killing every last wolf in the country and totally wiping them out.
To put wolves into a state that is so small, highly populated, to me is asinine.
There's another group that feels like none should ever be killed.
I am certain that there will be a day that we see wolves on the western side of our state, and that's going to be really exciting.
Neither one of those work.
As this endangered species makes its comeback, and with the potential of more deadly encounters with sheep, cattle, and the working dogs alongside them,
That's the one that got attacked by the wolves.
the pressure is on to sort out the best way to manage the quickly growing number of wolves in Washington.
I think there's a big chance of success for humans and wolves being able to live together here for decades.
People are so tired of what's going on and so cynical, and they feel like they're not going to get any help out of this, that there's absolutely no social acceptance of wolves around here. And it's going to get worse.
Wolves just elicit such a strong emotional reaction from people.
No one's done more to protect wolves in Washington than Diane Gallegos.
Where we can try to prevent harm, we want to try to prevent harm.
Her career's dedicated to it as the head of Wolf Haven in Tenino.
Wolf Haven International is first and foremost a sanctuary for captive bred wolves that are in need of a home. We have 57 animals in our care right now. 2 of them are coyotes that were actually born in the wild and needed a place to stay. We also have 8 wolf dogs, and then the rest are wolves.
Gallegos is hopeful someday this sanctuary won't be needed if wolf reintroduction is a success in Washington.
I got to see a mountain lion in the wild. I've gotten to see a wolf in the wild. I want my children and grandchildren to have those same experiences and to have the wildlife that they know of be ones that actually are in the wild, not just in captivity.
Wolves have a long, complicated history in Washington. 200 years ago, species like the gray wolf were prolific, with up to 5,000 roaming both sides of the Cascades. But as fur trapping became popular in the 1820s, wolf numbers shrank. Then, over the next 100 years, agriculture boomed, and so did bloody confrontations as wolves attacked livestock and chickens.
Although wolves will look like a dog to people who aren't familiar with wolves, they're not like dogs. They have a bite that's twice as strong as a German Shepherd's, which they need to be able to take down a wild ungulate like an elk or a deer and to be able to bite through those bones.
Wolves were shot, poisoned, and killed with government support until they were wiped out by the 1930s.
That sound of the wolf howling is kind of an iconic, scary movie sound, right? And when they're actually slinking around and preying on your livestock, and that's your family's source of income, that's scary too. That's why the government had a bounty on wolf pelts. Let's get rid of these wolves, they're big and they're bad.
For 80 years, wolves remained mostly folklore.
A close friend of mine visited Wolf Haven, and it was when he heard the word the wolves began to howl that it brought back the nightmares that he had as a 5-year-old. You know, the Parade magazine had an advertisement for making sure people got whooping cough vaccinations for their children, and it was a wolf dressed up like grandmother holding a baby. So it's all of those subtle cues that people get from our media that I think further feeds into a lot of misinformation people have about wolves.
Wolf howls were silent in Washington until 2008. That sound and these pictures captured on remote cameras set up by the environmental group Conservation Northwest. 6 wolf pups in the North Cascades, the first documented wolf pack in Washington state.
Wolves are actually naturally recolonizing our state. So none of the wolves that we have in our state that are in the wild are wolves that were brought in by someone. They walked in on their own 4 paws.
This was a native species of Washington. It plays a ecological role in our ecosystems in the state. It plays more of a personal role in many people.
While the wolves returning to the state has been controversial, it's sort of part of the natural balancing act of Mother Nature. You need the predator at the top of the food chain to help keep that all in balance.
As conservation has celebrated the return of wolves,
Wolves are really, really popular if you don't have any.
Eastside ranchers immediately feared for their $700 million a year cattle and sheep industries.
These are serious critters, and they're vicious. They're not your family dog. We didn't get rid of the wolves in these areas because it was something that we just opted to do. They were gotten rid of years ago for a reason. Our government paid to get rid of these critters in this area.
To manage concerns from all sides, Washington developed a 300-page wolf conservation and management plan. The goal, to eventually have 15 breeding pairs living in 3 recovery zones for 3 years in a row. In just a matter of years, the state's already halfway there, with 8 breeding pairs documented in 2015.
I think we're on a really good path and that we should stick with the plan. I don't see anything that's happened in our state that hasn't been predicted.
The state's recovery plan is the beginning of the end for the wolves. I think the number of breeding pair that they've modeled are way too many for the habitat that's available for the wolves. And I think if they allow that, the wolves are going to multiply so quickly that the Fish and Wildlife is going to have to start poisoning, shooting from helicopters to control them. And that's no way for a proud animal like a wolf to go down.
So far, 90 wolves live in Washington. The packs are clustered mainly in the northeastern corner of the state, 3 in the North Cascades and 1 in southeast Washington.
The dynamics of wolf packs are ever changing. Pack sizes are changing, wolves are dispersing, they're producing offspring. So it's a constant battle to try and keep up, to document numbers and territories that we have in the state, as well as attempting to document new potential pack territories.
Fish and wildlife experts keep tabs on wolves,
Alrighty.
setting these live animal traps in wolf territory during warm months.
Wolves are just like humans. They don't like to run randomly through the forest on most occasions. They use roads and trails, just like humans do for the most part. And so those are the places where we'll generally set traps, because we know eventually a wolf is going to travel up or down that road or trail and hopefully get curious with what the scent we laid out for them to come and investigate and hopefully be captured. We can either just strictly use a drag, and once the animal's caught, if he's on a drag, he'll run down the road and then dive off into the woods somewhere, and then this thing will get hung up in the brush. We show up, we find him, we can go down there and mobilize the animal and start processing. This is the collar we put out primarily. It's a GPS collar, and so it works just like a GPS unit anybody will have when they're out hunting or wandering around in the woods.
22 wolves so far are outfitted with the battery-operated tracking collar that lasts about 2 years.
This is a species that was gone for almost 100 years. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence that they're returning to Washington for everyone. And this won't happen again. This is when it's happening.
They're a lot more popular if it's a myth. They're an interesting animal, really visual, stunning. I mean, they're incredible. And I don't think anybody wants to see them wiped out, but it's a lot easier to talk about and love wolves when you don't have to deal with them.
Joel Kretz is an outspoken Republican state representative who traded his Western Washington upbringing
I like to just sit here and listen to horses eat,
for sunshine and solitude.
See, they like this leaf. That's their it's the best taste, and then they like leaving all the stems,
Breeding horses in the eastern corner of Washington most impacted by wolves.
This one I got lucky when he was a few days old. I got up and scratched him, and once you get a little scratch on him, they're pretty glad to see you. The problem that we're seeing is that only about 15% of the state is affected, and it's all right here pretty much. I mean, we've got 12 out of the 16 packs in my legislative district. So you've got a lot of interest from around the state dictating what the plan's going to be, and we're getting all the impacts.
On this side, they're killing us. If I go out of the sheep business, I want it to be on my own terms. I don't want it to be because somebody decided that we needed wolves.
Dave Dashiell raises 250 head of Angus cattle in Stevens County.
This is the Huckleberry Mountains here.
At one time, he also had 1,800 sheep grazing on leased timberland around the Huckleberry Mountains.
We'd been running here for, 30 years, never had any problems, and then the wolf come along. Not long after that, we started noticing lambs with dings on them, like bite marks on their shoulder, or on their side, or on their rear end or something. Then you'd find an occasional dead one. Well, we thought we had a cougar. So we called the game department. They come and looked at it. They had their computer with the collar data, and right where the dead sheep were was right where the collar was pinging. And so then we knew we had wolf troubles.
Those wolves feasting on Dashiell's sheep, the now well-known Huckleberry Pack, filmed by Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife 2 years earlier in 2012. The agency tried using guard dogs and spotlights to keep the wolves away, but Dashiell says it had no effect.
We just kept finding them and finding them and finding them, and no matter what we did, it didn't stop. Them wolves had us figured out. They knew where the guard dogs were, they knew where I was, they knew everything that was going on. Them sheep were stringing out, headed towards the bed ground. They just pop out of the brush, yank one off the trail, and kill it. When you're that close to them and they're still doing it, what can you do?
In the end, wolves killed 24 sheep. At that point, Fish and Wildlife had to intervene. The agency issued a kill order for 4 wolf pups out of the 12-member pack, a decision met with vocal opposition and online efforts to stop it. Made worse when, instead of shooting the pups, the state accidentally killed the breeding female.
I think the helicopter flew for 3 days or 4 days, and they got that one female, and then they had traps and snares out, and then, they weren't having any luck getting anything in those. The big wheels in Olympia, or whoever was calling the shots, they were either scared of repercussions or didn't care. I don't know. All of a sudden, no helicopters, no traps, no nothing. See ya. They basically bailed.
The Huckleberry Pack wasn't the first controversial wolf removal. That was the Wedge Pack in 2012. The alpha male seen here in this King 5 video was captured and collared in July. Then in September, wildlife officials used that same radio signal to track and kill him. along with 5 other members of his pack, after they killed 17 cows and calves from the Diamond M Ranch.
It was over just east of here, about 30 miles, and they'd been having trouble for several years, and they're not really the kind of people that ask for help. They didn't, get it out, but it finally got so bad that they were losing a lot of animals and a lot coming back in, tore up.
I did not agree with killing the wedge pack. Wolves were pretty new to us still. There was a lot that still needed to be in place. We had a wolf conservation and management plan that had been approved, but the plan wasn't fully funded at that time.
To put wolves into a state that is so small, highly populated, to me is asinine. And I don't even think it's fair to the wolves. It's almost like setting someone up for a fall.
Brian Verrilman runs Sawtooth Outfitters near the town of Pateros in north central Washington.
A lot of what we do is just like the airlines. We move people and baggage from point A to point B. The airplanes do it at 300 miles an hour. We do it at 3 miles an hour. I guess I got 1 week light left.
Verrilman's proud to show off his memories from a lifetime of hunts in these mountains.
A 500-pound bear that I shot myself with my trusty Winchester there that was in the Sawtooth Mountains. I took that buck myself about 40 minutes after I shot that bear. It was a good hunting day.
For 35 years, he's led groups of vacationers on extended camping adventures in Washington's high country to hunt for deer.
This is our transportation method. The mules are packing the gear in these mani packs.
Just as ranchers are dealing with wolves, so are hunters.
About 8-9 years ago in the Sawtooth area that we hunt during the general season, it became pretty much void a game, and it was replaced with the howling of wolves. Probably 80% of what we do is repeat business, word of mouth, guys that have been going for years. I got a group that's been going 30 years with me. When the wolves started becoming an issue, they started skipping years. And that's the question most hunters ask now when they call, how are the wolves in your area? I thought I built a big enough barn, and now I got more stuff that I haven't got room for.
Verrilman says wolves, not other predators, are killing deer, and the clue's obvious.
Can never get a barn too big, I guess. Wolves have a different set of tracks than cougars and everything. So yeah, the tracks are the telltale sign, and then usually after the kill, in the deeper snows, it looks like someone took red paint and just drew 5-6 lines down the mountain because they gorged themselves. They just bury themselves into that carcass.
He thinks the wolf recovery plan is a mistake and worries Washington could someday become like Alaska. As the wolf population there grew, moose and caribou declined. So Alaska launched an aerial gunning predator control program targeting wolves and opened a regular wolf hunting season.
They decided to go in the air with helicopters, and they literally shot thousands and thousands and thousands of wolves. It took 5 years for them to see the small increase of a more balanced population between the predators, the wolves primarily, and the ungulates.
We got people looking in this part of the country to move to Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, not because there's less wolves, there's more wolves there, but they've got programs that are working and they've had the courage to follow through, and when there is a huge problem, they take care of it. But nobody feels that way in Washington. We don't feel like the department or anybody else really has our back. And when it gets too crazy, it's a lot easier to listen to emails than actual, wildlife science.
In Washington, some elk and deer loss are accounted for in the recovery plan, which estimates 100 wolves will kill between 2,000 and 3,000 elk and deer a year, and 300 wolves, 7,000 and 10,000.
This wolf here, he was from Wyoming. That's where I came from. And I do have permission, a letter from the Fish and Wildlife Service to possess this. And so we are legal.
Scott Becker is a fish and wildlife wolf specialist.
This was an older individual, starting to gray a little bit on his feet, and even around the muzzle, you can see the gray coloration there. If he were to be a really younger one, it would be almost pure black right there at that point in time.
He says a wolf like this needs to eat about 20 deer a year to maintain a weight of 100 pounds.
If they have pups, they're gonna have to obviously eat more than a pack without pups. The largest known wolf that was actually captured in the Northern Rockies, he weighed, I think, 147 pounds, but he also had about 15 to 20 pounds of elk meat sitting in his gut.
Elk and deer hunters spend $300 million a year in Washington. It's not known how much wolves could affect that, but if losses get too great, the Wolf Recovery Plan lays out options for the state, including shortening the hunting season, using non-lethal or lethal methods against wolves, or reclassifying wolves as a game species once they're recovered, allowing people to hunt them.
With, restoration of the habitat and maybe some wolf howling at night, that you could probably do pretty well with wolf ecotourism.
Washington State Senator Christine Rolfes believes wolves aren't necessarily a deterrent.
I was just out in Yellowstone a couple of years ago in the winter, and probably everybody that was there in December, January was there to see wolves. And so if we do this right, we can help augment the rural economies too. It would be way cool to be able to go out to Eastern Washington with my husband and sit in a lodge in the woods somewhere and hear wolves howling. That would be great.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator Rolfes.
Senator Rolfes isn't an East Sider.
I live in the west side of Puget Sound. We don't have wolves, we have coyotes.
The self-described animal lover with a background in environmental science tapped to be part of the legislative team to work wolves and their protection into Washington law.
Back in the days of the wolf wars, I was in the House of Representatives, and they actually, both sides said we need some women in this discussion to help play down some of the testosterone level that's been going on in these wars.
A war divided not just on party lines, but pitting East versus West, rural versus urban.
The bill that got the most attention was Representative Kretz's bill to introduce wolves to islands.
My thought was we need to spread the love around the state. We can all enjoy these megafauna.
I think he was aiming for the San Juan Islands, which is a senator from the San Juan Islands who was very active in these debates. I live on an island too, and I emailed him and said, hey, wait, did you mean Bainbridge Island as well?
I took the bill to a bunch of the major wolf supporters in the legislature, and I said, here's the bill we can finally co-sponsor. We're going to move wolves to your part of the state, and not one of them would sign it, which, to me is beyond just a little hypocritical.
Behind the scenes, we all knew that it was just his sort of poke at us. It wasn't personal. And we knew the bill wasn't real, but it was his way. He's from the Okanagan area, and it was his way of saying, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You guys want wolves, you get them too. And that was, I wouldn't say, oh, that changed everybody's perspective, but it was a way, it was kind of a humorous way to draw attention to the plight of the people that he represents.
I think it's a real difference when you can talk about wolves 300 miles away and how cool that is, and I want to know they're there. It's another thing when they're snooping around your backyard and they get to Issaquah, it'll be, I think, probably a little bit different. And I think those legislators realized that if they actually were confronted with wolves in their district and there's people's cats and dogs or even farm animals getting ate in their backyard, all of a sudden it changes a whole bunch, and you can't take that moral high ground of we're saving wolves.
Compromise eventually came out of the Capitol, and license plate money now covers costs of preventive measures like range riders.
Here's some of our cows right there.
Ranchers also have the chance to sign a cooperative agreement. It comes with compensation money if wolves kill any livestock.
I signed up for it, but I had other producers tell me, I think by signing that, you're telling them it's okay for the wolves to kill your calves. And I said, well, if that's the way you feel, that's fine. That isn't the way I feel at all, that I'm giving the wolves a blank check to have at them. But we're stuck with them. And I want to think there's room out here for all of us.
I think every state where the wolf is recolonizing has these same issues. And I think we've been progressive in moving forward in a more collaborative approach than a lot of other states have been.
Rather than meddle more, the legislature instead put wolf reintroduction in the hands of a diverse task force. Ranchers, environmentalists, wolf experts, and others, all with opposing views on how to settle this, spent 1 year sorting out a plan that requires better management of rangelands first before deadly force can even be considered.
We think there's enough space here for both wolves and livestock.
Wildlife officials now share wolf GPS data with range riders.
Before this program, that was almost unheard of, that we would be sharing the locations of an endangered species with the public. But we're able to do that now.
Range riders are also trained to use about a dozen non-lethal tools, including guard dogs, radio-activated guard boxes that make noise and flash when triggered by the collar of a nearby wolf, and brightly colored fladry. It's a long rope with bright colored flags. As this video from the state shows, putting up fladry around a dead cow can stop a wolf from eating it and developing a taste for livestock.
It's about looking at the different options that you have, making an assessment saying which ones show the most promise for this area, and then trying to incorporate that into your program.
So this is a wolf track. It's difficult to distinguish.
They're all tricks that work for Kaiser and Johnson.
Well, I noticed it because I've been looking at cow tracks, and that is definitely not cow, and it's not cat.
In 5 years, wolves only got 2 of their cows.
So far we've been successful, but I don't think we have enough habitat for the amount of wolves we have. I think when there gets to be too many wolves and the deer and the elk are gone and the hunters have quit buying their licenses, then there'll be a problem.
When people come in and start talking about, we're going to put up bright lights and Fladry, you tell me how well it would work out here. That might work on a little calving pasture, that sort of thing. But I think the unrealistic trust in the preventative things just leads to total distrust and cynicism on the rancher's side.
Representative Kretz says not even range riders are a good fit for everyone.
You could just come up my driveway, it's 3 miles long, and I didn't move out here to have someone camped out that I don't know. I mean, that's letting somebody right into your family and your business, and that's not going to happen here. I think that the danger is that particularly West Side environmental interests consider those things the be-all, and it's not. You can do a lot of preventative things. Some of them have some impact, but it's not a complete solution, and it's never going to be.
Kretz believes the bar is set too high to kill nuisance wolves. The federal government classifies wolves as endangered species in the western 2/3 of the state. They're delisted east of Highway 97. That's where Washington Fish and Wildlife now has authority to kill wolves as part of its new management strategy.
When we start to get to the range of 3 to 4 confirmed wolf depredations, the agency gets in that range of starting to consider whether lethal control might be an option. But that's not the only one. We also look at have we exhausted the non-lethal tools that we can apply to the situation. We also consider the question, do we expect these depredations to continue?
We've had some classic cases of depredations, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife keeps raising the bar. They've killed 3, 4, oh no, we'll go to, and they just keep going and they never do anything. And until there's some good faith there, and I think admitting that lethal has got to be part of the program, I don't think anybody out here trusts it, period. There's a suspicion that is what's behind all this, that the wolves are being used as a tool to remove people from rangeland, put pressure on the rural areas. We've seen it with the spotted owl, we've seen it with other environmental threats, and here we are again.
I'll pull up here by this fir tree and I can point out where the sheep were.
After his confrontation with the Huckleberry Pack, Dashiell had to move his herd.
I started getting calls from the department. Have you found some place to go? Have you found some place to go?
In this particular case, between the grazer and the owner of the property, looked at some alternative sites on the idea that, why would we go back to the same site if we had some conflict there? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Looked at some alternative sites. Those didn't work out for that producer, so he's decided to go another route.
And Fish and Wildlife says it was never the state's intention to drive anyone away from rangelands. Dashiell couldn't find a nearby place, so his sheep ended up 150 miles to the south in Eltopia.
It was a bad deal. We was buying hay for $260 a ton. We got some cheaper stuff for $240. That's gonna kill you. There isn't no bottomless pit of money around this place to draw out of. And then it was 100 and something degrees down there, and you're spending a lot of money and going backwards is what was happening. The only thing that wasn't happening is they weren't getting killed.
But a year after he lost his sheep,
That's the one that got attacked by the wolves. That was after he got home from the vet.
wolves attacked one of Dashiell's working dogs.
That's his ear that we're holding up, big gash there. That was after we got all the hair and stuff knocked off of him. And that's a wound on his chest. I didn't have any doubts on what had happened. I don't know where the attack took place, but it had to have been right in here someplace. These cows were back over here on the other side of this field, and there wasn't anything in this field here at that time. There's one right there.
Dashiell later found wolf tracks to confirm his suspicion.
It's about 4 4 inches long, but it's not real big around. It's about 3 inches wide. So it's not huge, but it's about that big. Julie wants to sell out. Why would you want to work that hard and have everything tore to pieces, and then it's your fault because the wolf was here first, or whatever the argument is, you know? How much of that can you take? So it gets pretty disheartening.
When there's something like DeShiel's case over there with the Huckleberry Pack, if you're not going to do something on that, the question is, well, if not that, what? And people aren't going to wait for it.
When all other things are exhausted, it falls back on you to do something. And we're real close to just giving ourselves the tools, giving our local folks the tools they need, whether it's consistent with state law or not. It doesn't matter. It's time that we control this population in this area.
And Stevens County Commissioner Wes McCart says some people have already taken matters into their own hands, even though it remains illegal to hunt wolves in Washington, like the 3 people in Twisp who violated the Endangered Species Act in 2012. Investigators found photos on a computer of the hunters posing with wolves they illegally killed.
Clearly, we don't want livestock producers to take matters into their own hands. We want to make sure that they're aware of the legal situations, that it's a protected species under state law and federal law in a portion of the state. We don't want them to reach a level of frustration where they think they have to take matters in their own hands.
Come on, bud. There you go, big shake. Let's go.
Killing an endangered species, what conservation groups and range riders like Johnson are trying to avoid.
Wolves were here first, and in God's perfect world, wolves were a part of that system that made it all work. It wasn't until man came along with the herds of cattle, and there were thousands of wolves around. The wolf is just going to do what it's always done, which is eat and feed its family.
This is Abby. She's the friendliest.
In addition to that license plate money from the state, part of Johnson's salary is paid by the environmental group Conservation Northwest.
We can't pay for every person that needs that service. You know, we're just trying to set up some examples and show people that, you know, this can work. The goal is to keep as few losses with livestock as possible, as few effects on healthy deer and elk herds, and as few as wolves have to be killed in any given year. So if we can get to that point, then I think we're at and wolves are recovered in the state, then we've been successful.
I'll call it the old protocol now.
But agreeing on a definition for success may be the remaining challenge for wolf reintroduction in Washington.
We need to look at the recovery zones and the bars for recovery, and I think we have to have a realistic approach on lethal take. To have any trust in the program, you got to see it work once in a while, and that's not to say we want to kill every last wolf, but when you've got them continually depredating, once they go bad, you're probably not going to change their ways.
A lot of the conflict that is called human-wildlife conflict is typically usually human-human conflict. It's that clash between people who are convinced that they're all right and that they've got the answer to what is a very complex issue. Human-wildlife conflict is very complex, and it requires that all of us get to know one another better, come with open hearts, wanting to more deeply understand each other's perspectives so that we can come up with solutions.
Even people that don't like wolves or they love them to death, they learn to respect them because of what they can bring to the table.
Tell them, Riggs. People should look at the wolves as they do the grizzly bears, the mountain lions. They all kill something at some time that might anger a person, but they are a part of nature and they are just trying to survive.
And Johnson's confident wolves can share the land with livestock.
I want people to know that wolves aren't the vicious, wanton, senseless killing machine that they're led on to be. Wolves are part of an ecosystem that actually they have a very viable part in that system. Even though, we all live here, we can all live here together.